Imagine being trapped inside a thousand-year-old fortress, absolutely convinced your walls are unbreakable, until a brand new superweapon proves you dead wrong. In 1453, one ambitious sultan didn't just end an empire, he accidentally jump-started the modern world. Welcome to this explainer of the historical source material. Today, we're unpacking the gripping true story of a siege that brought a millennium of history to a sudden, violent, and honestly world-altering halt. We're talking about the final days of the Byzantine Empire, literally the last remnants of ancient Rome, and how its destruction birthed a totally new global era. Section 1. The Unbreakable City. Byzantium's Last Stand. Okay, let's dive right into this. So by the time we hit the 1450s, Constantinople is really just a shadow of its former glory. I mean, the Black Plague has completely decimated the city. The population is down to maybe 50,000 to 60,000 citizens. They're led by Emperor Constantine XI, who is a brave monarch for sure, but one with incredibly few resources. He's relying heavily on this makeshift patchwork of volunteers and Italian mercenaries just to man the legendary Theodosian walls. And waiting right outside those walls, Sultan Mehmed II. The Ottoman Sultan has meticulously assembled a massive, well-equipped army of 60,000 men, effectively blockading the city by land and sea for 53 grueling days. It is the ultimate David versus Goliath scenario, but Goliath has brought something brand new to the battlefield. Section 2. The Basilic Cannon, a medieval superweapon. To build this unstoppable force, the Sultan actually hired a highly skilled Hungarian master craftsman named Orban. Orban's task was to cast a terrifying siege bombard, basically a cannon larger than absolutely anything Europe had ever seen before. Now, the crazy part is, the Byzantine emperor had actually turned Orban down previously just because he couldn't afford him. But Mehmed II, he had the vision and, more importantly, the funds to make this medieval superweapon a reality. The raw, terrifying power of this weapon literally changed history. Modern structural mechanics and ballistic analysis tell us this cannon fired with a muzzle velocity of 216 meters per second. When that massive projectile hit the inner wall of Constantinople, it didn't just chip the stone, It created a devastating 9.15-meter breach. It was a completely asymmetrical threat. Ancient Roman-style fortifications were just never designed to withstand anything like this. But here's the thing, building the gun was only half the battle. Transporting it was an absolute logistical nightmare. It was cast in Adrianople, and it took 60 oxen and hundreds of men, 3 entire months, just to drag this massive beast 140 miles to the front lines at Constantinople.
Section 3. Ships on dry land. Mehmed's naval genius. Let's look at how he pulled this off.
So while the cannons relentlessly bombarded the landward defenses, knocking down fortifications day and night, the Ottoman naval fleet was facing a very different kind of obstacle out in the water. Mehmed sets an ingenious, really an inescapable trap. First, he builds forts on either side of the Bosphorus Strait to control all ship movement. Next, his navy tries to enter the Golden Horn, but the Byzantines have blocked the waterway with this massive, heavy chain connected between 2 towers. So what does Mehmed do? Well, he executes a mind-blowing logistical feat. He builds specially constructed wooden ramps and literally hauls his entire fleet of warships over land, right around the Genoese colony of Galata. He completely bypasses the chain and drops his ships right into the Golden Horn. Just like that, the city is completely suffocated. Section 4. The Final Assault. May 29th, 1453. Okay, we need to bust a major historical myth right here. For centuries, romanticized accounts claimed that Emperor Constantine XI spent the eve of the assault giving this grand, tragic speech inside the magnificent Hagia Sophia. But the reality? He'd actually abandoned the imperial palace and was working out of a dirt tent erected right in the enclosure between the great and outer walls. There was absolutely no time for sweeping speeches. He was out in the dirt, frantically coordinating these feverish last-minute repairs to the collapsed defenses. Thanks to the diary of Niccolo Barbaro, who was a Venetian physician actually there on the ground, we know exactly how the attack unfolded hour by hour. Mehmed sent his forces in 3 brutal waves. 3 hours before dawn, he sent the irregulars, and a lot of them were Christians kept in the camp against their will, actually, specifically to absorb the initial defensive fire and exhaust the defenders. Then, pre-dawn, a second wave of Anatolians struck, described as fighting like lions unchained. Finally, at dawn, against an absolutely exhausted city, Mehmed sent in his fresh, elite troops, the Janissaries.
Barbara's diary leaves us with such a chilling description of this. The Janissaries attacked with this overwhelming sensory horror, screaming and sounding castanets, and the noise was so deafening it was reportedly heard 12 miles away. The psychological terror alone just shattered the morale of the defenders. They felt like they were fighting something not of this world.
And right before dawn, the Sultan fired his great cannon one more time. The massive 1,200-pound cannonballs knocked down the desperate repairs the Greeks had just made overnight. Worse still, the blast created incredibly thick cannon smoke, totally blinding the Genoese and Venetian defenders. Under the perfect cover of that smoke, the Turkish forces finally overwhelmed the barricades and poured right into the city.
Section 5. The End of Rome. A millennium collapses.
Take a second to really think about this. What happens when the absolute center of the world, the anchor of an entire civilization for 1,000 years, just falls? The shockwaves sent through the 15th century world were utterly paralyzing.
The reality inside the walls was grim. The emperor died fighting in the streets. Ottoman flags were raised over houses and monasteries alike. The blood, according to eyewitnesses, flowed like rainwater, and 60,000 surviving citizens were either taken prisoner or sold into slavery. Geopolitically, the Italian maritime superpowers of Venice and Genoa lost their primary eastern ally and trade hub. This triggered a catastrophic economic decline that would eventually force them to submit to foreign monarchs.
Section 6. A new world begins. The modern era's spark. So, the crucial point is this dual ripple effect. The fall of Constantinople didn't just end an era. It actually triggered the two most important movements in modern history simultaneously, the Italian Renaissance and the Age of Exploration. Let's look at that first pillar. As Constantinople fell, a massive flood of Greek scholars, philosophers, astronomers, linguists, they all fled to Italy as refugees. And they didn't come empty-handed. They brought precious manuscripts rescued from destroyed Byzantine libraries. For the first time, Italy was introduced to the complete works of Plato, which completely transformed Florentine humanist thought into Neo-Platonist philosophy. They also brought fresh Greek copies of Aristotle. Before this, Italians mostly had Arab translations, but the original texts highlighted Aristotle's focus on empirical study and observation. This directly fostered the birth of Renaissance science. And this brilliantly illustrates the second pillar. With Constantinople secured, the Ottoman Empire commanded the absolute key crossroads linking Europe to Asia. Suddenly, the vital overland trade routes for silk, porcelain, and highly demanded spices were subjected to skyrocketing tariffs. The economic motivation to bypass the Ottomans became desperate. Because the land was closed, Europe was forced to look to the oceans. This directly pushed Portugal to explore the coast of Africa, reaching India by sea in 1497. And it is the exact reason Spain funded a certain Christopher Columbus to sail west in 1492, completely reshaping the global map. Which leaves us with this final, profound question to consider. The siege was a horrifying, bloody end to the last living connection to ancient Rome. But without those massive cannons breaking those legendary walls, without the disruption of trade and the flight of ancient scholars, would our interconnected modern world even exist today? It's fascinating to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer of the source material, and keep questioning history.